Welcome to Greater New Hope Crisis Intervention and De-escalation Training. If you are watching this video, that means you are doing a makeup or you're a new hire and you're looking for the de-escalation and crisis intervention training. This training is going to be brought to you by me, Gigi, your point of contact for training. We're going to be talking about crisis intervention and de-escalation and how it pertains to our particular clients. You may have done training in the past or at another facility where you've learned de-escalation skills, and you can bring those skills along. But the key thing about Greater New Hope training is it is no contact, no physical contact whatsoever. So if you had previous de-escalation training and they told you that, you want to put your hands on a person, or this is how you want to get out of this chokehold or something like that, you want to go ahead and bypass that for this particular training, because Greater New Hope training is consisted of non-violence or non-physical contact when we have our de-escalation process. I'll be sharing my screen so you all can watch. And at the end, we'll talk about the videos as well as some of the PowerPoints that we will be presenting. Throughout the course of this video, you'll be getting a number. We'll tell you what to do with those numbers. This is basically to say that you have went through the whole video, you've heard the numbers, and at the end, we're going to ask you what is that total number. So we may give you a number in the middle as well as the end and tell you to add those numbers together and give us a number at the end. We may tell you to subtract those numbers, or we may just say put those numbers together. So for example, if at the middle of the video, you get the number 5. And then at the middle of the video, you get another number 5. We may say add those numbers together. And at the end, it'll be a total of 10. Or we may say subtract those numbers. Or we may say just put those numbers together. If we put those numbers together, it's just 55. And that means that you've watched the video and we can go ahead and give you credit for that. Typically during these trainings, when we're live, we do have a safety plan and a supervision plan that we will show to you. But due to HIPAA laws, we do not do that in our recordings. We will talk about it and what it looks like, but you will not actually see a real safety plan or supervision plan on this particular training because it is recorded. So first and foremost, let's go ahead and start off this particular training with a nice, fun video. And you should be able to see the screen and hear the sound. And here we go.
So, why you pick this class anyway? It's pretty hard. Beautiful view. All right.
All right. All right. Y'all shut up now. Last week, we talked about the physiology of the animal brain as it pertains to aggression. Now, is there anyone here that can tell me why most alligators are abnormally aggressive?
I know the answer to this question. Raise your hand.
Anybody? Anyone? Yes or you, sir?
Mama said that alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth, but no toothbrush.
Your mama said alligators are ornery because they got all them teeth and no toothbrush. Wow. Anybody else? Yes, or you, sir?
Alligators are aggressive because of an enlarged medulla oblongata. It's the sector of the brain which controls aggressive behavior.
That is correct. The medulla oblongata.
Mama
The
said,
medulla oblongata is where anger, jealousy, and aggression come from. Now, is there anybody here can tell me where happiness comes from? Anyone? All right. Let's hear what Mama has to say on the subject.
Mama say that happiness is from magic rays of sunshine that come down when you're feeling blue.
Well, folks, Mama's wrong again.
No, Colonel Sanders, you're wrong. Mama's right.
Something wrong with his medulla oblongata. My back. Coach Klein said I could. Mr. Coach Klein said I could.
All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. That is from The Water Boy. If you could not guess, let me go ahead and pause that. That is from The Water Boy. If you could not guess, with Adam Sandler, and a lot of people like that movie. And I thought it was great, and he makes great films. But one of the key things we want to take away from as we go into this crisis training is there are ways that could have been so prevented. And I'm sure you guys are thinking in your head, well, maybe they shouldn't have did this, or maybe he shouldn't have said that, or maybe he just should have kept walking away. And so hopefully while we're going through this training, you'll be able to think about some of these things as we talk about it in regards to that particular video and other videos that we will see. There are things in that particular video that we can identify as the client, such as Adam, trying to process everything. You know, he realized that, you know, well, mama told me this, and this is a school setting, so it's a little different. And he should have still been welcome to share those opinions to his professor. But obviously we see that wasn't a successful case. But as we see, when he was getting frustrated and he realized that people was laughing at him, he said, you know what, let me walk away. That was his thing. He didn't ask anybody. He just realized, I'm getting angry. I'm getting upset. I'm just going to get up and walk away. And sometimes, in most cases, the best thing to do is just allow that person to walk away. We're going to stand back. We're going to keep our eyes on them. But they realize, I'm getting heated. I'm getting frustrated. I need to remove myself from the situation. And he did just that, or he tried to. And then, of course, I think that professor kind of kept egging at him, antagonizing him a little bit, which caused him to attack him. So again, even though these are a funny video and it's a funny clip, I want you guys to consider that as we go through this video or this PowerPoint. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to begin with crisis intervention. So again, this is crisis intervention with me. I'm GM, or you can call me Miss Gigi. I'm typically the person you can come to with all things, questions, policies, and procedures. But let's say you have a particular question about a particular client and a particular safety plan. You can reach out to me as well, but those are going to be probably more questions directed towards the caseworker, maybe workers who already worked in the field with that particular client, that has saw that crisis in that client. Those may be your best point of contact. But if for whatever reason they can't assist you, you can always reach out, say, hey, Ms. G, I have a question about this safety plan, or I got a question about this crisis, and I can be able to assist you. Please remember that Greater New Hope does not condone bullying or violence of any kind. So just in that previous video, how the professor was like, well, let's see what mama said. That is a form of bullying. We do not want to do that. We do not want to make these people feel belittled or in any way. So we want to make sure that we're not bullying or pertaining in violence of any kind. We do not put our hands on any client, person, or coworker, especially when we're de-escalating a crisis situation. And I have that in here because some people may feel like, well, they say they're going to fight me, and so I got to be ready, and I used to be a boxer. If at any point in time you feel that whatever crisis you're in is going to cause you to put harm on somebody or the people around you, then that's when we know we need to definitely call for some more help, such as 911. So we're going to go through stages of crisis. And again, if you've been previously trained on different avenues of de-escalations and crisis, we definitely appreciate you for knowing that, and you can definitely utilize that. The key things that we're going to talk about, again, is pertaining to our particular client base that we have here at Greater New Hope, meaning some of the troubled teens we work with, some of the foster youth we work with, as well as families that we work with in home. So the key thing that I want you to take away from this is change can cause a crisis, and crisis can cause a change. For example, a lot of people had a crisis during COVID. It's out of our control. It happened. That change caused a lot of commotion and crisis. Sometimes a crisis can cause change. Sometimes a death of a family member or a lack of support from a caseworker, or missing an appointment, that crisis can cause a change in behavior. So I want you to continue to keep those things in mind as you go through these stages. There are 4 stages that we will discuss as you see them here. I will not go through every bullet on the crisis PowerPoint, but we will go over the important information. So of course, at a pre-crisis, this is all about prevention, 100%. How do we prevent a crisis? Well, we come to trainings. We all know that trainings are conducted for all Great New Hope staff on Wednesdays. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have new hire training. So if you're like, I need more de-escalation training, it's not enough that we do on Wednesday, you definitely want to reach out to me and say, hey, Ms. G, I think I need more training. So that is the first way we can prevent a crisis. We can train. We can be present for training days. If we have training days in person, we can be present for those. We can watch the recording videos, and we can just be prepared with what we can expect. If you're working with temp lodging or kids in hotels, that's the KIH, kids in hotels. If you work in that, reading the supervision and safety plan is going to be your key to prevention. Not every client comes with a supervision or safety plan, but most of them do. If it's your first time working with kids in hotels, all of those kids come with the binder. That binder tells you a little briefly about the kid, the caseworker, possibly why they're in state custody, why they're in foster care, and any crises or issues that they may have. This is going to be the same in your ISRIS and in-home. Reading the safety plan, reading the supervision plan. For the most part, everybody's going to come with one. If not, it's totally okay. That means that no crisis has been seen in your particular client. That doesn't mean you're good to go. It's going to be easy peasy. You may actually see a crisis that you want to update us about. We'll talk about that later. But in temporary lodging or ISRIS, you always want to read that supervision or safety plan before you start your shift. Soon as you get there, soon as you greet the person, soon as you take over a shift, you want to read that safety plan and you want to see what has changed since the last time I worked with this client. If you're working at 181, that's the big hotel. You're reading the safety steps at the front desk. You want to know where your exit signs and numbers to call. Why is this important? Because if the elevator gets stuck, that's not going to be a good time to say, well, let me see where they keep the elevator notes, or how do I call the fire department, or what if the sprinklers are broken? Who do I reach out to? You want to already know where that information is and who to contact in case of an emergency. All Greater New Hope staff should have the non-emergency police number for Portland that's located here, as well as the child abuse hotline number. You may hear somebody say, call the hotline. Your safety plan may say, call the hotline if your kid runs away. The safety plan may say, if your kid begins to raise their voice, go ahead and call non-emergency. So these are going to be the numbers you want to keep in your phone, because if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. In temporary lodging, if you know your kid deals with crisis, you want to read some of their precursors. For example, your client cannot stay in the hotel room for all 8 hours of the day of your shift. That will cause a crisis. So in the beginning, you want to make sure, okay, me and this other worker, we're going to plan out our activities. We're going to call the caseworker, make sure they don't have any upcoming appointments or visitation that we need to have on our list. We need to make sure we have a plan for our client, so therefore we can try to prevent a crisis from developing. If you work ISRIS in-home or at 181, again, sometimes those safety and supervision plans are kind of straightforward. Sometimes they can be generic. If you feel like you're working out in the field and you think that this safety plan needs to be updated, you've seen a behavior that kind of shows you something different, then you want to go ahead and you want to give notice to the administration team, Miss Linda, Miss Danielle, maybe Miss Renee, Miss Felicia, those caseworkers, and you want to let them know, hey, I know this client has a safety plan or never had a safety plan, but I think, based off my observation, here are some concerns that I have that may lead to a crisis, and so we should probably create a plan. So we're always looking to update any safety plans, any supervision plans. So don't think that you work with the kid on Monday, that safety plan is going to be the same on Friday. So you always want to freshen up on reading the safety plan and supervision plans so you can be best at it. So for example, we were watching Waterboy, and maybe if the professor would have looked at his paperwork, he would have saw that that particular kid, the water boy, has always been homeschooled. He's never been in a classroom setting up until now. And so if he would have read his safety plan or his supervision plans, he would have said, okay, possibly if I ask this kid some questions in class, they're probably going to be maybe a little non-traditional, or maybe they may be a little off. Why? Because he's been homeschooled for so long. So the typical answer that a typical college kid or high school kid may give you won't come from a kid that has been homeschooled. So we want to consider those things, that when we're working with kids, when we're working with safety plans, how can I approach this knowing my child's limitation, knowing my client's limitation, okay? Next up, this is where we will include a safety plan. But here are things where they say, how did we get here? How did the crisis start? Okay. And you're going to be able to know those precursors prior to the actual crisis, because you're reading in the safety plan. The safety plan says when the kid can no longer talk to his parent, he gets into a crisis. When the kid has a canceled therapist appointment, he goes into a crisis. When the kid is denied access to the pool, they go into crisis. When the parent is short on hours at work, they go into a crisis. So these are going to be those precursors that say, okay, I'm with the client and I'm hearing from the caseworker that the scheduled meeting that they have with their parent will not happen today. And I know this leads to a crisis. Let me make sure I know exactly what to do. Over here on your left side, you're going to see, on your right side, you're going to see some of the examples of what things these crises can look like and where they can happen. All crises are not going to happen at school or at the home or in the hotel. Some of those crises are going to happen in the community. You want to always be ready. You may say, my kid never acts up at Target, we're good to go. My kid never acts up at Winco, we're good to go. I don't need to know anything. And then you later found out that their worst enemy was on aisle 10 of Winco, or their parent that they cannot see, or maybe that abused them. They may look like somebody on aisle 13, and then they go into this crisis. So always be ready. Some of the things that we see more so with our kids in the hotel is verbal escalation behavior. They'll start talking loud, they'll start talking fast, or they'll pace, or they'll kind of clench their teeth. Oh, I can't stand you. They'll say stuff like that. They will get loud with you, but that doesn't mean you should also raise your voice. Sometimes they're trying to do this as an intimidation factor, thinking you're going to back down and you're not going to say anything. And they may say some wild stuff. You want to hit me? Hit me if you want to. Hit me if you want to. We do not want to indulge in any of those behaviors. But again, this is where we are when we first get here. So before we go into intervention and management, I want you all to remember the number 10, 10, 1, 0, 10. Think about that number, hold on to that number as you will be given further instructions in the video. 10, write that number down, 10. So in a crisis, and these are going to be different definitions that you all can see, but the most important thing about in a crisis, you want to think about, how can I do the opposite? Right? And that sounds kind of weird, but typically if your kid is angry, your kid is loud, your kid is frustrated, your kid is pacing, your kid is challenging authorities, they're throwing items, all of those things you do not want to engage in. You want to do the opposite. They're raising their voice, you just keep your voice lower. They're pacing, you're at a distance. They're throwing objects, you're out of the way. All of these things are going to be important as we move into the intervention and management. We want to say, I identify these things, I see what they're doing. You're taking a mental report. Hopefully your other worker is taking a mental report and writing down what is happening. And we're doing the opposite. We want to show support. We want to show that, hey, I'm here for you, and I know you're going through a crisis. I'm gonna let you have your moment, but I'm here for you if you need me. And so those are going to be the examples of what some of this will look like. So, Greater New Hope staff response, the best thing, safety is key. We cannot stress that enough. If at some point you don't feel safe, then the crisis is really going to elevate, and we're not going to be able to de-escalate the situation. So first and foremost, safety is key for yourself and for the client. Typically, when you're working with kids in hotels, there's 2 workers to 1 client. Sometimes when you're working with ISRIS or in-home, there's 1 person to 1 client. So keep that in mind that typically, if you're on that 1-to-1 ratio, you really got to make sure you've identified the safety cues, you've checked yourself, and you're aware of your surroundings. When you're on a 2-to-1 ratio, you want to make sure at least that other person is aware, hey, we're right by the exit. I have the numbers for 911 or non-emergency or child abuse hotline. So keep those things in mind. So first things first is check yourself. Do you feel safe? Are you mentally capable of de-escalating this crisis? Do you have support? Are you angry? And we ask those things because you may not always have a good day as the worker. You may have woke up and you may have found out bad news. Your parent is sick, your child is suffering in school, maybe you're having issues financially, or you're having a mental breakdown due to some things that's happening in your personal life. So you want to say, let me check myself. Am I okay today? You know, I had my coffee, I'm feeling in a good mood. I can do this today. I can take on the world. Are there some people who's like, listen, I didn't get enough sleep last night. My newborn kept me up for 10 hours. Then my other kid threw up everywhere. Then my husband car couldn't start. You have all these issues. You're like, I barely made it to work. Okay. So when you check yourself, you realize if there's a crisis, I probably don't need to be the main person talking to my client. What should I do? I should probably step back, be the one who takes the notes, be able to call Miss Linda, call the caseworker, call the child abuse hotline, right? So that leads us to our next thing, assign roles. In that prevention state, when we're sitting at the hotel, we're waiting for our kid to wake up, we're reading that white booklet that tells you all about their particular shifts that they had before you, we can assign roles. Hey, listen, if Johnny gets out of control and I've had a bad day, Ms. G, can you be the one that helps the client and I'll be the one that take the notes and call if we need additional support? Yeah, sure can. We've created that plan. We assigned the roles early on. So therefore, in a crisis, I don't have to look around and say, well, where is my helper? What? She not here helping me, or he not here helping me. I know that they're right there taking down notes. I know they're right there. I got Ms. Linda on standby. I got child abuse on standby. You know, they're there as that support system. So make sure you assign roles. While you're out there and you're thinking about safety, remember to give personal space, not just to you, but to the client. We all know about 6 feet. COVID has taught us that. However, sometimes that may be a little too far. So think about that 3 feet strategy. Now, 6 feet is still isn't bad. If you feel like, you know, I'm 6 feet, I'm okay. I can still see my client, hear my client. That's totally fine. But keep in mind that you want to be close enough where, let's say something happens, the kid falls out, the client falls out, goes into a seizure, you're able to be there to support in any way possible. And the reason why we do this is because we want to make sure that the client knows they're here to help, but they're not too close to me where I feel threatened. Okay. Now, again, this is going to be a nice little overview of safety is key. I will not go over every detail, but we will talk about some of this. We want to always be supportive when we're working with these people who are having a crisis, whether we're working with a client, a kid, a parent, or maybe you're out in the community and you actually see a crisis of somebody you don't know. You want to keep in mind that not all crises are mental crises. Some crises are medical crises. So a medical crisis will look like somebody who is suffering from a low sugar count. they're diabetic, maybe they're diabetic 1, and they just need a boost of sugar. And so typically what like an ambulance will have is like a boost of cake icing, where that person who's suffering from a diabetic crisis, they'll put that sugar into them. That sugar will get into the bloodstream immediately, raise up their blood pressure, and they're good to go. Okay. But sometimes a medical crisis can look like a mental crisis, can look like a breakdown, somebody just acting out of the norm. If my blood pressure is low, maybe I'm just acting erratic and I'm crazy and I just look like I want to fight. I'm very agitated. All of these things can look like one big crisis, but sometimes it's not. And so that's why safety is key. We want to make sure that we're approaching this non-judgmental. We don't know if it's a stranger that this person is having a medical crisis or a mental crisis. Hopefully with your client, you will know, hey, my client suffers from a medical crisis, so I need to make sure we have the medical needs there, the medication, if they're, anaphylaxis and have an allergic reaction. So we want to make sure that if it's a medical crisis and they're our client, we have the proper tools. When you are offering support to your client, you want to make sure you have an open posture. You want to feel welcome. You don't want to be like this. Facial expressions. If somebody ever told you, hey, you got to check your face, you probably have facial expressions you don't even know about. And so sometimes you want to check your body language when you're actually trying to assist in a crisis. Don't try to look at the person straight on, eye contact the whole time. That can also be intimidating. So kind of look away, kind of wonder, if they're talking to you, make sure you're actively listening. You're doing the active nodding of the head. You're looking like you're interested in what they're saying to help them through this crisis. Remember your nonverbal cues, those are really big. Those sometimes speak more volume, okay? So again, if your tone is really loud and they're talking really loud, nobody can hear, right? You want to bring it down. You want to be straightforward with them. You want to be open. You want to kind of, smile and show that you're supportive. You don't want to look just as angry as them, like they done wasted your time. So you want to keep those things in mind. What else can we do? Things to help with communication during a crisis. Again, active listening, share your observation. Sometimes you may be in a crisis and a person may say, I just can't believe they drained the pool. And you see that the pool is drained. They're having a crisis because they can't go swimming. You can share that, yeah, the pool is drained. I see it. Because you don't know why they drained the pool either. But you understand their frustration. One of the things you want to be cautious about is sharing humor. Everybody has a particular personality and deals with crisis situations differently, or maybe situations that make them uncomfortable differently. So be cautious about, sharing humor. If you are a humor person and that client typically knows that you're a jokester and you want to ease in a joke, like, you can't go swimming now because, there ain't no water, so you're just going to hit your head. If that's something that you typically do. But for the most part, we do like to steer clear of humor, especially in the heat of the crisis. But if that's your personality, if that's something that you typically do to kind of help a kid come back and they know that that's how you can navigate them back, then definitely use that. But we do caution using humor. Another key thing is just being silent. That goes with your active listening. If you can actively listen to the person and know that this is what they need, they probably just need you to listen to them. So don't necessarily ask many questions. Just do the nonverbal cues of nodding your head. Okay. Next up, I'm going to show you guys a video. So I'm going to stop my screen. And while I stop my screen, I want you guys to take away, meaning subtract from the number 10. I want you to subtract the number 7. So 10 minus 7. We're not done yet, but 10 minus 7 is going to be your next phase. So you already got the number 10, so you want to minus that by 7. And then next, we're going to watch this video. If you can come up. Here we go. And I'm gonna share my screen again. So 10 minus 7. You got your number? Okay.
Brief video is going to describe simple calming and de-escalation strategies. When people are escalated, it often comes from a sense of threat or fear. Even if the threat is not real at the time, their past experiences with people in the world may have wired their brains to expect harm or danger. When we as humans perceive threat or are otherwise incredibly stressed or angry or scared, we activate our survival brain. This more primitive part of our brain has only one job: to keep us safe. It doesn't care about reason or logic. In fact, the thinking parts of our brain turn off and we act mostly on instincts.
And so this is going to be key. Remember, typically in a crisis, folks aren't really thinking logically, right? They're just saying things. They're leading off of these emotions. They're just talking. So keep that in mind that, they may say some things that may be inappropriate, may be offensive to you. So you want to be like, why would they say that? They know I'm not like that, or they know I don't do that. Remember, they're not necessarily thinking, they're just spewing out things, spewing out words that they don't necessarily mean.
These instincts include reading nonverbal cues from our environment. Those nonverbal cues are actually more important than verbal cues or what people say to us.
This is going to be key for, remember, those facial expressions. Keep that in mind.
When people are escalated, at their core, they want control. We give them control over their own safety and decisions. Do not block people, corner them, or block entrances or possible escape routes. As soon as you...
This is going to be key, especially if you're in a hotel, okay? So you work with kids in hotels, and let's say you have the exit door. That's just going to be the main door that you both come in. Typically, the client has another door to their room, but they don't have a door to the exit. Then you have 2 windows, okay? So if there's a crisis in that room, technically there's only one exit. That's that door that you all came into. If that kid is, I want to get out, I want to scream, do not block that door, because they know that's their only way out. Now, you could break a window. We don't recommend it. Okay. Sometimes hotel windows don't open either. So if they're like angry, they're upset, and they're trying to leave the room, let's go ahead and allow that. One, that takes away from damaging the room. That takes away from throwing an object at the TV and breaking it. Ripping up material, maybe possessions of a client or a caseworker. We can go ahead, let's let that kid exit the room. We're also going to exit. We're also going to give them that space, but we're not going to block an exit or a doorway when they're escalating, because technically that's our only way out, both yourself and the client, and we want to remain safe. Plus, the outside has more room, right? We don't want to be confined in these 300 square feet. If there's an issue, let's go ahead and allow that client to exit out of that room. If you're working in a home and there's a crisis, know where your exits are. The windows, is there a sliding door to the patio? The front door, is there 5 locks on the front door? You always want to identify your exits and know exactly where you are. If for whatever reason you've never been in the client's room and something on the referral says this client previously used to have, weapons, or if you see the client going into the kitchen where there's sharp objects such as knives, you want to make sure you are moving yourself out of harm's way, just in case this crisis elevates to something that may be unsafe.
They want to fight or flee even more. Give 2 arms length distance. Keep our body posture open so it does not appear that you are hiding anything.
And that 2 arms length is going to be different for every person. If you're a short person like myself, you're going to be probably a little bit less arms length than somebody who may be about 6 foot. So always keep in mind, am I 3 feet away? Am I 6 feet away? Just make sure you have enough room. I typically say if you can put your arms out and turn in a circle, you probably have enough room at least for yourself.
Keep your body posture as relaxed as you can, even if it's hard. A looming, towering figure only sends the message that you want to dominate.
And this is going to be key, again, for people who are much taller than their client, such as a kid. If you're much, much taller or much, much bigger than your client, you want to take a step back where you're not necessarily eye level, but you're not towering over your client. You're able to say, hey, I hear you. I'm taking a step back. Okay, so always take a step back where you're almost kind of level with them so they know they're not trying to jump on me. They're just taller than me or they're just bigger than me. So I've taken a step back to give them, one, that space that they need, but also to remove any threat that I'm trying to come down on you.
Feels okay to do so. Ask them what would make them feel safe or feel better. Put the control back on their turf.
This is going to be really important if you're early on in a crisis and you see those precursors, right? You've read that safety plan and it says, hey, when my clients start pacing, they're about to go into it all the way. So in that moment, when you recognize that, you can say, hey, how can I help you? Hey, I see you pacing. You need some help? You want me to do anything? Do you need to call your caseworker? You want to call your sister? You've read that safety plan, so you know the steps that they have to kind of bring them down when they're pacing. You want to do some math questions? You want to watch TV? Do you want to do some coloring? Do you want me to stop talking? Do you want to do jumping jacks? You have that ability early on, if you know those precursors, to say, how can I help my client get out of this stage before it elevates?
Ask what would help. Ask what could happen next. One of the most famous practices and sayings for de-escalation is low and slow, from Teresa Bolick. Low and slow refers to both your body movements and your voice or speech.
And this should be very self-explanatory, as I spoke about earlier. If you start talking with a loud voice, they're going to feel a certain type of way. They may start to get angry because they feel like you're yelling at them. They may feel like you're trying to be controlling over them. So make sure you start low. And as somebody like myself, who sometimes can talk very loud, just as a regular person in a regular conversation, I have to check myself and say, hold on, let me check myself. They're going through a crisis. I know I'm typically the happy-go-lucky. How you doing? I know I now need to bring it down. So if you know that's you, remember the first sign of de-escalation is, let me check myself, right? I might be happy. I may have good intentions, but I come off bold. I come off loud. I come off, kind of strong. And, some people may be like, that's too much for me, Miss Gigi. You got to back up. So when you know and you check yourself, you can say, let me start off low and slow. Okay. And so that means everything is just pretty chilled. I checked myself and I brought my tone down.
Just like it sounds, we want to keep the tone of our voice low and the speed of our voice slow. When you lower your tone and speed, it makes it more possible for the other person to process what you are saying and not feel threatened, as opposed to a higher pitched tone and quick speech, which frankly increases stress. Then we also try to lower and slow down our body movements and posture. So try to sit in a chair or on the floor, especially if you were children, and especially if the person who's escalated is lower down than you. Maybe they're on the floor or in a chair. If you get on an even playing field, this gives the nonverbal cue that you mean no threat. And try to slow down your body movements so as to not further alarm their cues for danger. Move slowly, walk slowly, keep your hands out and open where they can see them. Next.
And so remember, all of those things are going to be very key when you're definitely dealing with younger people or preteens, kids that are much shorter or smaller than you. These are also going to work when you're working with adults. but not necessarily having to get down on their level. Typically, you're probably roughly already the same height. So you want to take a step back. But again, being open in your posture to let them know you're not trying to attack them or give them any type of issues. You're just here for support. You also showed your open body that you're not mad at them. Sometimes when we have a posture like this, it's like, I'm just waiting for this to be over so I can go get something to eat. That shows that you're not engaging. That shows that my behavior is making you mad or frustrating you. So we don't want to show that. We may be thinking, I really want this crisis to be over so I can go eat lunch, but I'm not going to show that on my face. I'm still going to be open. I'm still going to keep silence. And maybe while my kid is pacing and having their moment, I'm just thinking about what I want to get from Chipotle or McDonald's or Taco Bell. Okay. But we don't show that on our face. We don't do this. We don't be like this. We just walk open posture.
The tip, Name It to Tame It, made popular by Dan Siegel. By naming emotions, we gain control over them. Therapists have known this forever. Acknowledge that they may be feeling anxious, angry, especially if it's a child. Stay with that feeling, validate it. Let them know the feeling is okay as long as they stay safe. We also like to say, regulate over educate. When people are in distress, it's not the time to teach or educate or think back about what they could have done differently. The only goal is to regulate their emotions. Usually this is done by giving space and time, staying calm, and helping provide a calming atmosphere. It takes the body 20 to 30 minutes to come back down to baseline after a perceived or an actual threat. Just think of your own situations when something really scared you or startled you. Even if you look like you're getting back to normal, your body is still pumping all those stress hormones for a while.
And remember, sometimes, especially for our young people, they may think they're coming down, but those hormones are still up. They're still in that fight or flight mode. So sometimes they're still jittery or still jumpy. So keep that in mind. Even though your client may be coming down from that particular issue, that they still may be jumpy or they still may be quick because they still need to process some of those hormones that haven't came back to a normal state.
Wait it out. Just help people regulate. If the person was aggressive or destructive, especially if it's a child, there does, of course, need to be a consequence. But wait on talking about the consequence.
And this is going to be key if you're working with kids in hotels, for sure. Some kids may get to a point where they were so angry that the nail polish got onto the wall or it got onto the bed, or maybe they ripped a hole in the sheet, or maybe they messed up the TV. All of these things has happened in the past. In those times that they threw the shoe and they're yelling and screaming and it hits the TV, we're not gonna look at that. Now you gotta pay for it. Look at that. Now we gotta go do an incident report. Look at that. 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 No, we don't want to do that at that point. No, we really don't want to do it at all. They know they messed it up, right? But in the heat of the moment, we don't want to remind them, oh yeah, you're gonna have to pay for that. All right. Yeah, you messed up. Like, how dare you mess up the TV? Now I can't watch Law and Order. You know, you don't want to correct them into that. You want to just validate their feelings and get them out of the crisis.
Finally, two of the most important things you can do all along the way, and that's before people get too distressed, or even while they're distressed, is to validate their feelings and be empathic. I see you are struggling. I see this is hard. If it's okay, I'll stay here with you until you feel better.
And remember, those are going to be in the early stages, okay? So you want to see if at those beginning precursors, well, did I see it? Oh, this looks like they're getting riled up. I probably should stop right now, okay? So back to our PowerPoint. Give me 1 second. So, what not to do. So we watched the video. We talked about the things that we should do, stepping back, reading the safety plan, allowing, areas to know where our exes are, but what are some things we should not do? Do not ask personal questions or give your personal opinion, start arguing, any false reassurance. None of those things are going to help your situation. If all else fail, you don't know what to say, let's just remain silent and let's make sure we're jotting down what is happening on our crisis, because we're going to have to put it in our notes. We're going to have to submit our report to, either Miss Danielle, if you're Kids from Hotels, if you're in ISRIS, to Miss Renee. You're probably going to have to fill out an incident report, submit that to Miss Linda. You're going to have to submit something to a caseworker. So at the end of the day, if you're like, I don't remember what she said in those de-escalation videos, remember this: let me remain calm and keep my eyes on my client, okay? If you don't say much, they'll get through it and then we'll come back. But typically, if you just follow that safety plan, you'll be well off. One of the main things you want to keep in mind that's on here is the false assurance. Typically, we hear a lot of people saying, you'll be able to go to the store if you just act right. You'll be able to go see your mom tomorrow. And sometimes that's not even the case. Sometimes the state has not awarded visitation for the parent, so they won't be seeing their parents in the next 15 days while you're working with them. So don't say you'll be able to see your mom if that's not in the report. If it's been a crisis with the mom, don't say you're going to go see the friend and that friend could possibly be in jail, or even worse. So when it comes to talking, you do not want to reassure the kids something that they're screaming about. I just want to have a conversation with my dad. I was supposed to talk to my dad today. We were supposed to have a meeting today. Why can't I talk to my dad? Now, in the pre-crisis, in the prevention, you got the call or the caseworker told you or Ms. Linda told you that, hey, we won't be able to talk to dad today because dad is, incarcerated or he has a court meeting, okay? If that's the case, we can't see dad. So saying that I'm gonna be able to see dad won't happen. Now, if you've been working with this kid and the kid is having a crisis, I want to see my dad. I was supposed to have a meeting with my dad, and you just find out the dad just overslept and they rescheduled the appointment for another day, or the dad missed the bus and they rescheduled for another day. You can give that assurance because it's accurate. Hey, your dad missed the bus, so they had to reschedule it for tomorrow because of your other appointments. Or, your dad got sick, he got COVID. And so for the protocol, you have to wait till next week to see your dad. That's if you know that information. If you do not know the information, don't guess the information, simply don't provide it. But false reassurance is going to be the biggest takeaway on here. One of the other things we don't want you to do is don't change the subject, okay? They're talking about they're upset that they can't see their dad and that, they wanted to hang with him and tell them all about their new Pokemon cards. And you say, you want to go swimming? You're not listening to them or nothing. Or you say something like, you want to write a book? It doesn't make any sense. Now, if you want to give them advice, a part of their crisis that you think will help, let's say they're having an issue because they can't see their dad, and you say, hey, I know that's pretty frustrating. Would you like to write a letter to your dad? That's helping them in the crisis to get those feelings out. But don't disregard what they're saying by changing the subject completely. Okay. And of course, most importantly, we never touch. Never, 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 never put your hands on a client. Never put your hands on a coworker. Never put your hands on a peer. If you feel like this person finna hit me, you want to step back and you want to call for help. Okay. You do not want to be in the way of crossfire. If you see a client picking up a chair, move out of the way. It's probably coming towards you. Okay. But we never put our hands on our clients, on our parents, on our workers, any of that. Okay. Now, you had two numbers. I want you to take the result of the number, times it by 5. Okay, you had two numbers, you were given a task. I want you to take the result of that number and times it by 5. By 5. Okay, we're almost over. Is it over yet? Almost. So now we did prevention, we did training, we read the safety plan. This is what's happening. The teacher read that the water boy was homeschooled and that all of his answer probably is going to be related to something homeschool related. But we still had the crisis anyway, right? He still was upset and he still attacked me. The client was still frustrated that the plans was canceled, the trip was canceled, and they still tried to, scream and yell, and they still start pacing down the hallway. We did all of those things. Then we gave them their space. We said, okay, let me give you your space. We called Child Abuse Hotline, and they told us we're going to put in a missing person report because the person ran away, or we called the caseworker and the caseworker was able to talk to the client and bring the client back down. So we went through all of our 3 steps. So now we're on the other side. Okay. What should we do now? Should counseling or additional support be required for a future crisis? Possibly. The way the steps that was provided on the safety plan, did it really help your client? Did you really see an improvement? Do you think that there's other things that this client could have needed in that safety plan to help better them? Or do you think it was spot on? It was a great safety plan. The way we executed it, they came down, we're good to go. Okay. Do you need to fill out an incident report? These reports can be found at 181. They can sometimes be found at the front desk of some of the hotels, such as the Oxford Suites. Did somebody or something get hurt? Okay, that's how we do an incident report. Did somebody throw a chair and it went by and cut you on the shoulder? Did the client pace up and down to the point that they tripped over a cord that was in the hallway? Is there an incident? If so, should we report it? And you will report it. You always want to assess and evaluate the response between caseworkers and administration team. The administration team are not going to be on every call with you. You may get a different administrator to assist you on one crisis versus another. Typically, because we all have the same training, we're going to approach it as such. But let's say you get into this crisis and now the police are on the scene. The police have now taken over, but we're still taking notes. We're still determining whatever my client or your client is going through, and we're still putting that down. If the police say, hey, it's nothing we can do, we came out here, there's no threat, we got to go, we're putting that down. Hopefully we're getting the police reporter's information because they'll give you a business card. What if they say, we got to take your client to Emmanuel Hospital for a psych evaluation? We're going with them. We're reporting all of that. We're putting that on here so we can talk with the caseworker. You can talk with Miss Linda and you can reevaluate what this safety plan looks like and what can be done differently. So here are questions that you should have and you should know. What is the number for non-emergency? That number has come up. You should all know it, especially if you're taking your mandatory reporting training. But if not, that number is pretty simple. Non-emergency is 503-823-3333. It is so simple, but it's something, again, you will get to know for yourself. But you must, or you should know non-emergency number. That's, again, Portland Non-Emergency Police. They'll come out if there's no vital threat and they can assist you. Now, sometimes they take a long time. So that's why we say, let's encourage you to read that safety plan. If you need them, definitely call them. But if not, you probably just need to call the Child Abuse Hotline. What is that number? Of course, everybody has that number. But if you don't, it's 503-SAFE. 503-SAFE. That is a number, again, you want to keep saved in your phone. How many times should you read the safety and supervision plan? Again, those words are interchangeable, but you should read it every shift. You should read it every time you're going to go see the client because something could have changed and they could have updated it, and you want to be well aware and know what is happening with your client, okay? So that is going to be your crisis intervention de-escalation training. If you took the two numbers, took that result, times it by 5, you send that result number back to the email that you got this video from, and that will let us know you have completed the de-escalation of crisis intervention training. If you have any additional questions, feel free to write back and ask back. Most important takeaways is when you go out into the community, when you're working with these clients, please make sure, one, you read the safety plan, you know exactly where your exits are, and that you have those important numbers saved in your phone. And if all else fails, you call Ms. Linda and say, Ms. Linda, help me, I'm struggling. That's the completion of this video.